Hey, Sam from 3D here. In this video, we'll continue our series on the basics of Blender and CGI in general. In the last couple of videos, we talked about how to render engines and materials work. Today, we'll set up basic scene with cameras and lights, as well as change between Cycles and Eevee. Let's jump to Blender. I'm using a different character today. These are available at characters.design. I added these polka dots on her shirt, using the same technique from the materials video. Check out the entire playlist. I'm sure you will enjoy what you find. Right now, I'm in a preview mode, so if I press Z, you can see the material preview is selected. This means that we are using Eevee to render this viewport. If we go over the generate, you will see that everything will turn black. That's because we have no lights, but before you get into lighting, let's make a little bit of background for this character. Okay, now I'm going to the render view, Shift A and the light. I'm going to add a point light to show this up, and it's tiny and right at her feet. So I'm going to back to solid view and I'm going to move it to place where I can see it shining on the character. When you click the light, you will notice that you will have this icon right here. This will give you the properties for the light, like its power, color and radius, which I will show you what it does in a minute. If I go to render view now, you can definitely see it, but it's too dark, so just increase the power. Let's put it to, I don't know, 1000, maybe 1000 watts. This value is in the watts, so if this scene is at correct scale and you add the correct amount of watts, it should illuminate just like it does in real life. The color option does what you expected it to do. And now for the radius, you can see that we have a very strong shadow behind her. The radius makes this point light kinda like a bigger light bulb, so the shadows get softer. If we increase it, you can see that it gets softer. Now this is running reasonably fast on my computer because it is simple scene and my machine is pretty capable. However, if your computer is not good enough for doing this in real time, or it's just taking too long because you are seeing this so complex, we can actually see this in Eevee. We'll go back to the material preview, click on this arrow right here and enable scene world and scene lights. And now I have a much faster view to preview this. You can see that when I move the camera around, the shadow does change, but if you keep the camera static, it goes back to that soft state. There are a couple of ways of making Eevee renders look a little bit better, including the viewport, but we'll talk about that later. And you can see that this whole place is very dark. If you click on this little world icon, we'll have the properties for the world. It's set to transparent. I'm just gonna click on it and set its background. This background color does influence the render. As you can see, it looks less darker because the background is illuminating the scene. And you can definitely see this if we change its color. You can probably see that this is a little too much. You have two options here. You either turn this to black and you manually add the lights, or the better option, you click on this little yellow dot, go to environment texture and we are going to load an HDR image. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. Basically, it's 3060 image of somewhere in the world or a digital place that we'll use to illuminate the scene, gives us a bit more realistic reflection. You can find a lot of these images online for free and I will leave the link in the description for this one. Now that I have the image loaded, you can see that we have much more natural light, and if I zoom in on her eye, you see the reflection of the world on her eye. I only shown you one light object, but we have a couple more, so let's show the rest. Shift A and we have a sun. It works just like a real sun. You can rotate at a point the shadow to different directions and also has all the properties that you expect for a light object. This angle is the same thing as the radius for this light source. It makes the shadows a little softer. The next one is spot, which works like a flashlight. And you have the same properties that we have from the others, and these properties for the actual size of the beam. You can also do this by clicking on it. And the last one is an area map. It's very similar to how Spotlight works, but it's a bit more of a bigger, broader shape. You can change the size, and the size changes how the shadows are soft. You can change the shape. This one is one of the most used items to make lighting, especially for this kind of scenario where we want to have a photo shoot. This little object is a ball of lights, so it emits lights everywhere. But this one doesn't. It only emits light in this direction. It does not emit light behind it. The distance does matter though. You can see it. The best advice I can give you for lights is to treat them like real lights. You can even take the inspiration from the real photos. And this is one of the best use cases for the Eevee. As you can see, we can do this very fast. And if I were in the render view, even with my computer, it does take a while so we can get a better picture. Of course, the result is different, you have more realistic result, but if you want to see something quickly, the Eevee preview is just as good. I also want to show you emissive materials, so let's put a little ball of light in her hand. Let's create a UV sphere, make it a little bigger and shade smooth. I'm going to add material to it, change the principle BCDF to emission shader, and put the strength to 5. Now you can see that it does not have the bloom effect. And if you saw the other video, you know how to enable this. You click here on this little camera, change cycles to Eevee, and just enable bloom. Now we can get it back to the cycles. You can enable stuff like screen space, reflections, which is, as the name implies, enables reflections. Let me show you that. We are going to bring metallic to 1 and roughness to about that. Now, if I come back to render properties and disable screen space reflections, you can see that we lost some of the quality, especially the character being on the ball reflection. This is just one way of making Eevee look a little bit better. The other ways are to enable stuff like ambient occlusion. This scene does not show how ambient occlusion works, so you can see on your screen right now how it looks. Basically, it darkens the contact area between meshes. You can also increase the quality of the shadows and stuff like that. And right now you can already see something that Eevee is incapable of, which is an emissive material. As much as it looks like it's emitting light, you can't see that light on her hair or even the background. If I change these to cycles, now you can see this ball is emitting light. You can see it on her hand, her shirt and her hair. This looks cool, so I want to render it, but I don't have a camera. Let's fix that by pressing Shift A and adding a camera. There are two ways of moving the camera. You can either use normal options like G and just move it around, or the way that I usually do it is to press 0 on the numpad so you can see what the camera is. Press N, come to view, and click on the locked camera to view. And now if you move the camera as it would in the 3D viewpoint, you will see that the camera object is locked to it. Anything outside of these little red dots will not be rendered. You can change some of the camera parameters by having it selected and clicking on the little camera icon. If you are a photographer, you have much better understanding of what these stuff do. I'm going to leave it as is and just position this where I want it to be. Now thing you can do to make your life a little bit easier to set up the camera in the position you want is click over here on the viewport display, composition guides, and enable some of these. I'm going to enable center. Now I know where the camera's center is and I want to put the character in the center. Now that you know how to select between Eevee and cycles render, I want to render this in cycles. And one of the main things you will see here is the max samples. Remember in the video where we talk about the lights emitting rays? Essentially, these are how many rays you are going to use. Treat this value as a quality value. The higher this up to a certain point, the better the image will look. This is a simple scene. I believe about 256 will work just fine. These are the viewport settings, so I'm not going to change them, but I will change the render settings. You can also specify a time limit for how long this will be rendering. And this is the noise option. Enable here will denoise the image based on computer magic from artificial intelligence. And now all that's left is to press F12 to render. And that's it. You now have a simple cycle scene and the know-how to make many others. That's all pretty cool. But let's say you want to render this in Eevee. Let's change this back to Eevee. But you don't want this ball to emit light. Well, as I said in the rendering engine video, rasterization, which is the technique that Eevee is using to render, relies a little bit on hacking. So let's do a little bit of hack. I'm going to select this green ball, click on it and cursor to select it. And now let's create a point light and make it bigger than the ball. And now I'm going to increase its power and disable the shadow option because since it's inside the ball. If I have this enabled, it will try to cast shadows inside and it will just bug out, and I'm just gonna make it green. Now it's actually emitting light. One thing you can do is select the light object and then select the ball. Press Ctrl P and set parent to object. Now everywhere the ball moves, the light object will move with it. This is not necessarily physically correct because you can, I don't know, make this thing blue so it doesn't make any visual sense, but you have the liberty to do so. I can increase the sampling a bit, maybe 128, and just press F12 to render this one. Now you also know how to make Eevee renders. This render took about 3 seconds to complete, while Cycles took a minute and 47 seconds, so almost 2 minutes. There are more complex things you can do to make Eevee closer to Cycles or just a bit better quality in general, but these configurations are more in depth than the purpose of this video. That's it, congratulations! You now have the skills to configure and render a scene in a Blender using either Cycles or Eevee. If you want to learn more things about Blender, definitely look in our channel because we are producing more content for you. If you want to use the characters we use, go to characters.design. If you want to combine it with other 3D libraries, created many of them, go to 3D.design. You will definitely like what you will see there. Help us grow, give us like on the video, subscribe for more videos, and if you want to be surrounded by people who are learning 3D, definitely join our Discord server. Thank you so much, stay creative, bye!